We all have days we go home exhausted. We fall into our beds, we turn off the light and drift into a fitful sleep. For some of us, that happens almost every day. And for some of us, it only happens once in a while. We might blame it on a difficult project, a difficult client, your boss stressing you out. But what you might not realize is that there is much more contributing to that exhaustion. Stress comes to us in tiny, different assaults all through our day. What Harvard Business Review calls micro-stresses. And it's coming from sources you might never have considered. The volume, the diversity, the velocity of relational touch points, the way we routinely communicate and communicate with others, we all experience in a typical day is beyond anything we have seen in history, and cumulatively they are taking a toll on our health and our productivity. Now, you probably don't need me to tell you that stress makes you more susceptible to chronic illnesses and mental health conditions, right? Of course, if you remember, I already mentioned that 60 to 80% of all doctor visits are stress-related ailments and complaints. Now, unrelieved stress can lead to burnout, which is characterized by exhaustion, detachment, poorer performance at work. The problem is that most of us have come to accept these micro-stresses as just a normal part of our day. The reason why is because they are so micro, very tiny, that we hardly notice them. So what I'm going to do in this particular episode is to walk you through some of those micro-stresses. Particularly, I'm going to focus on 3 core areas. That is, my goal is to identify the sources of micro-stresses that are the direct result of the way we typically interact with each other at work, at home, at our different places that we go to. And I've categorized these stresses into 3 buckets. Micro-stress number 1 are those that drain your personal capacity. That is, they take away the time and energy you have available to handle life's demands. Micro-stress bucket number 2 is those ones that deplete your emotional reserves, that they drain you emotionally. And micro-stress number 3 are those that challenge your identity and values. Now, I'm going to ask you right now, do any of these sound familiar to you? So let's dig into them very well. Based on what I've just shared with you right now, I want to help you identify what's driving your stress. That is, micro-stresses that infiltrate your life in the way that you often not realized. So, I'm going to touch on these 12 common micro-stresses and the relationships from which they emanate. Now, what you are going to do is, if you're watching this as a video right now, what you can do is to, and if you're listening to this as a podcast, I recommend you go over to my YouTube channel and watch it as a video so that you can pick these one after the other. But of course, if you're listening to this as a podcast episode right now, you can follow along even that, but you get the best experience from watching it as a video. So I'm going to make it this way. I'm going to talk about micro stresses from 12 different touch points. I'm going to ask you to pair that with 6 different relationships we have in our lives. So 6 of those relationships are: number 1, the relationship with your boss; number 2, relationship with other leaders, perhaps maybe leaders around your workplace, or maybe leaders in your life, or maybe other leaders that you have in some other areas of your life. Number 3 relationship are peers, people that are with you in almost the same category. And then number 4 are relationships with clients. Number 5 are relationship with your team. And then number 6, relationship with loved ones. So I'm going to break these 3 buckets of micro stresses. I'm going to break them down further so that you can understand. Now, what you want to do right now is you want to identify the micro stress that drain your personal capacity. A lot of times there are unspoken tensions in the way we routinely work with our colleagues, other people, and they create stress when they generate additional work or reduce our ability to do what we already have on our plate. So, which relationship currently brings you misalignment of roles or priorities? Which relationships don't allow you to deliver reliably? Which relationships create unpredictable behavior from a person in a position of authority? Which relationship has poor communication as a norm? Which of these relationships tends to put a surge in responsibilities at work or at home? And then when it comes to depleting your emotional reserves, some micro-stresses cause us harm through negative feelings that drain our emotional reserves. So this could be worry for people we care about, uncertainty over the impact of our actions, fear of repercussions, or simply feeling de-energized by certain types of interactions. Now, what you want to do again is you want to identify one or two relationships that trigger this in you. So, what kind of relationship do you have in your life that makes managing others and feeling responsible, that makes you feel like you are managing others and feeling responsible for their success and well-being? Which relationships tend to have confrontational conversations? Which relationships tend to breed mistrust? Which relationships spread a contagion of stress? And then we get to bucket number 3. Bucket number 3 is basically challenging your identity or values. Of course, most of us like to think that we have a clear set of values and identity that guide our actions. In fact, at work or at home, interactions that routinely create friction with those values or challenge your sense of self can be emotionally exhausting. So you want to check the relationships that create this for you, and in order to also bring that home for you, which relationships create pressure to pursue goals that are out of sync with your personal values? Identify that. Which relationships tend to undermine your sense of self-confidence, your sense of self-worth, or maybe your personal autonomy, your sense of control? Which relationship tends to undermine that for you? And lastly, which relationship tends to serve as a disruption to your network? Now, when you look at all of these micro stresses, you find that somehow they routinely become part of your day. And of course, you hardly ever stop to check how they are affecting you. But the truth is that all of these relationships, all of these micro stresses, they add up. They may start off as momentary challenges, but the impact of dealing with them can linger for days or hours or months. So before you begin to hit burnout, it's important to begin to check these relationships in your life. Once you can identify these relationships, then it becomes more interesting for you, because now you have the capacity to identify them. Because for any stress to have power over you, you first of all need to identify that stress. Now that you've identified the stress, in the next video, in the next episode, I'm going to walk you through 3 things that you can do to handle these micro stresses in your life. I am Dayo Samuel once again. Remember to like, to subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you can receive that next episode. I'm going to see you.